If someone asked me whether Friday night traffic in Los Angeles or hell on earth is worse, my answer right now would definitely be the latter, because just 10 minutes ago, I was sitting in my used Ford pickup truck, listening to heavy metal on the radio and honking at the Honda in front of me that was crawling along at a snail's pace. And now, I'm fucking tied spread-eagled to a thick log, wearing nothing but a pair of SpongeBob printed boxers, and being roasted over a blazing bonfire like a turkey ready for the Thanksgiving dinner table. Damn it. Help. Is someone filming a prank video? This isn't funny. Guys, me leg hair's already singed. I writhed frantically and screamed at the top of my lungs. But what answered me wasn't some host jumping out from behind a hidden camera and bursting into laughter. It was a deafening beastly roar, loud enough to shake one's very soul out of one's body. I turned my head with great effort and looked toward the glow of the fire. My heart skipped a beat. The creatures gathered around the campfire weren't human at all. They were more than a dozen muscular monsters, each well over 2 meters tall. They had human-like torsos, but their skin was a rough, grayish-green, and their mouths were lined with sharp, upward-curving fangs. The one standing at the very front was even more outrageous. Had a head like a bull's. His muscles bulged as if stuffed with bowling balls, and he was clutching a bloody bone club thicker than my thigh. It's practically a hybrid of an orc from the Lord of the Rings and a minotaur. That bull-headed chieftain, whom I later learned was named Brutus, tapped the ground impatiently with his bone club and bellowed something in a gibberish language at the orcs standing nearby who were adding wood to the fire, although I couldn't understand that damn primitive language. Judging by the way they swallowed hard and the way they stared at me as if I were a prime ribeye steak, they were definitely discussing what level of doneness I'd taste best when roasted. Oh great ancestors, this is the hairless steak the heavens have bestowed upon us. A shriveled, aged voice suddenly rang out. A slightly shorter, elderly orc stepped out from behind Brutus. His name was Old Man Grok. He wore a mask made from the pallid skull of some unknown beast and held a wooden staff tied with feathers, as he began to perform a strange, incantatory dance around the campfire. The fire was growing fiercer. The scorching heat made the skin on my back sting, and oil was even beginning to seep out of my pores. On the outskirts of the fire, I caught a glimpse of a tall, young woman with wheat-colored skin. She had fluffy cat ears and a swishing leopard tail, and her amber eyes were studying me with curiosity and a hint of wariness. Man, if I weren't about to be roasted alive. I'd definitely admit that this beast-eared girl named Roxy was incredibly hot. But I'm almost done now. Hey, buddy, wait a minute. My meat's really tough. I eat fast food every day, and my blood's full of cholesterol and microplastics. If you eat this, you'll definitely get diarrhea. I struggled desperately, but the vine wrapped around my wrist was tightening around me, choking me. Just as that damn flame was about to lick my butt, at the very last second, a crisp electronic beep, sounding just like a cash register chime, suddenly rang out in my head. Ding. The host's vital signs have been detected to be dropping sharply, meeting the activation criteria. The universe's most powerful civilization's dimensional strike system has been activated. The translation module has been automatically loaded. The host has been detected to be in a life-threatening situation, issuing a beginner's survival kit. 1 divine authority trial card valid for 1 minute, plus 1 high-explosive flashbang stored in system storage. Can be retrieved at any time via telepathy. What the hell? A system? Did I die suddenly after gaming all night, and somehow end up caught up in this time travel craze? 10,000 shock horses galloped through my mind, but the burning pain on my back instantly snapped me back to reality. Screw whatever system this is, I've got to save my own skin first. Extract. Extract everything. Turn that whatever it ice up to full power. I roared frantically in my mind. The next second, I felt an indescribable force surge from my heart and rush through my bloodstream to every part of my body. My eyes instantly flashed with a blinding golden light. And immediately afterward, I used my mind to lock onto the flashbang lying quietly in the void, causing it to detonate directly above the campfire. Boom crack. A deafening boom, like a bolt from the blue, exploded across the open field, accompanied by a blinding flash of light bright enough to blind even a titanium malloy dog's eyes. Howl. Enemy attack. Protect the leader. The group of savages who had been drooling over me just moments ago instantly erupted into a chorus of blood-curdling screams. The massive minotaur Brutus was so terrified he plopped right down onto the ground, while Old Man Grok, who'd been acting like a shaman, flat out collapsed onto the muddy ground, trembling uncontrollably. The blinding light and deafening roar that came crashing down from the sky were completely beyond the comprehension of these Stone Age natives. The vines binding me had unexpectedly loosened during the impact, and I wriggled free like an eel, tumbling straight off the barbecue grill and onto the ground. Even though I took a face plant, I immediately gritted my teeth and got back on my feet, empowered by the Awe of God experience card. I felt like I could now punch through even a heavy tank with a single blow. I stuck out my chest, even though I was wearing nothing but a pair of SpongeBob underwear. I did my best to strike a pose that looked like I was looking down on everyone else as if I'd just descended from Mount Olympus. The translation module kicked in immediately, turning the gibberish I'd just heard into a language I could understand. while also automatically translating my words into their native tongue. You foolish mortals. I placed my hands on my hips and deliberately lowered my voice to make it resonate with authority. I am a messenger who has traveled across the endless stars to arrive here. How dare you roast a messenger of the Most High God over a fire? This American-style bluff worked surprisingly well. Once the blinding light faded, the orcs looked at me unscathed, with the golden glow still lingering in my eyes, and were all so terrified they didn't dare move. Roxy's beautiful cat-like eyes were filled with shock, and she took 2 steps back, clutching her bone spear tightly. Old man Grok raised his head shakily, his voice trembling from beneath his mask. A messenger of the gods. Could you be the supreme shaman from the ancient prophecy, the one who brings endless fire and food? Just as I was about to ride down the slope on my donkey to grab a bigger one, the 1-minute time limit on my trial pass ran out right then. The golden light faded, and that powerful sensation was instantly drained from me. I got goosebumps from the cold. Brutus was, after all, the chieftain. He scrambled to his feet, shook his slightly dizzy bull's head, and exhaled 2 thick streams of breath from his massive nostrils. He eyed my frail frame suspiciously and gripped his bone club tightly. That sound just now certainly sounded like thunder, but you're even skinnier than a goblin. Our tribe hasn't bagged any game in 3 days, and everyone is starving. If you really are the great new shaman, then prove it to us. How can I prove it? I swallowed hard and tried to stay calm. Brutus pointed the blood-stained bone club at my nose, baring his menacing fangs. Use your divine power to conjure up a supreme delicacy that will fill the stomachs of the entire tribe before the sun rises tomorrow. If you fail. He glanced back at the blazing campfire and let out a cruel, cold laugh. Well, then you'll just have to go back and be our dinner. Oh my God! All I know how to do is cook instant noodles. I can't even flip a fried egg properly. And these cavemen, who barely know how to use a stove, actually want me to cook a feast for them. Out of the corner of my eye, I quickly scanned the panel that had just popped up on the system. There was only a single, lonely beginner's recipe glowing faintly on it. Looks like I'll just have to stake my life on this thing. I stared at the flashing golden recipe on the system panel in my mind and nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. Supreme all-meat deep dish pizza beginner's edition. For God's sake. Are you serious? You want me to bake pizza for a bunch of raw-meat-eating orcs in this stone age where they haven't even invented the wheel yet? But Brutus's blood-stained club was still pointed at my nose, so I had no choice. System. What am I supposed to use to make a pizza? Mud and leaves. I screamed frantically in my head. Ding. The system has detected that the host is penniless and has granted a special interest-free starter loan of 100 system coins. The following core ingredients have been redeemed for you. 1 packet of high-potency instant dry yeast, 1 can of secret recipe Italian tomato paste, and 1 packet of miracle cheese conversion powder. Please use local ingredients to complete the dish. A few small bags suddenly appeared in my hands, so I immediately hid them behind my back and coughed twice, putting on an air of mystery. Ahem. Since you want to experience the ultimate delicacy from beyond the stars, do exactly as I say, like a grumpy 3 Michelin-star chef. I pointed at that massive tauren. Brutus. Right. Go haul over all those plant tubers your tribe has stockpiled, the ones that are as hard as rocks, and find me the biggest, flattest slab of stone you can find. Wash it clean and place it over the fire to roast. Brutus grunted heavily, clearly annoyed at being bossed around by a scrawny guy wearing nothing but SpongeBob underwear. But he was still wary of the miracle I just pulled off, so he reluctantly waved his hand and ordered his men to move the stuff. As for you, beautiful Miss Roxy, I turned to the curvaceous felon-eared girl and flashed what I considered my most charming smile. Could you please cut the remaining meat into pieces about this size? I gestured to indicate the size of a die. A glint flashed in Roxy's amber eyes. Without a word, she drew the bone dagger from her waist. With a series of swish, swish, swish sounds, several afterimages flashed by, and the tough cut of meat from the hind leg of that unidentified giant beast was instantly sliced into perfectly uniform cubes. Even Gordon Ramsay would have been moved to tears by such knife skills. Before long, a few orcs huffed and puffed as they hauled in a pile of huge, potato-like tubers. I immediately ordered Brutus to act as a human grinder. The muscular Hulk raised his massive fist and, in no time at all, smashed those rock-hard tubers into a fine powder. I piled the flour onto a clean animal hide, added some water and the high-potency dry yeast provided by the system, and then had the 2 strongest orcs take turns kneading the dough like crazy. As expected, the system's products are Amazoned in just a few minutes. The dough swelled up like a balloon and gave off an intoxicating aroma of wheat. Next came making cheese. I had them fetch some milk from a long-haired beast that had just been milked in the tribe, and secretly sprinkled in some miracle cheese transformation powder. In the blink of an eye, that jar of gamey, pungent animal milk solidified into a block of premium mozzarella with an enticing color and a wonderfully springy texture. Here comes the main event. I spread the huge, fully risen flatbread onto the flat stone slab, which had been heated to a scorching temperature. The moment the flatbread touched the hot stone, it let out a wonderful, crisp sizzle. Then, I generously brushed on the secret tomato sauce provided by the system. and the rich, sweet and sour aroma instantly filled the air. The onlookers, the beastmen, had never before experienced this ultimate aroma born from the collision of modern industry and culinary chemistry. I swear I heard a chorus of unison gulps. Brutus's bull-like eyes widened as he stared intently at the STON-I slab, and the stream of air shooting from his nostrils nearly blew the dust off the ground. I generously scattered piles of diced meat over it, topped it with a thick layer of cheese chunks, and then had Brutus bring over another red-hot stone slab to place over it, creating a perfect Stone-Age makeshift oven. Next came a long 5-minute wait. To be honest, this was my first time baking a pizza, and my palms were all sweaty, but for these cavemen, those 5 minutes were pure agony. As the cheese gradually melted, the savory aroma of the melted fat, the sweet and sour taste of the tomato sauce, and the toasty scent of the baking crust blended together, transforming into an irresistible culinary tornado that swept through the entire camp. Finally, I took a deep breath and shouted, "It's ready!" Several orcs worked together to lift the stone slab covering the top, accompanied by a wave of rising steam. An epic deep dish pizza full meter in diameter, golden and crispy, with cheese bubbles bubbling away at the edges, made its grand entrance. The scene was so beautiful that even I couldn't help but swallow hard. I cut off the biggest slice of pizza with a bone knife, and the string of cheese stretched a full half-meter. I handed this piping hot, delicious slice to Brutus, who was still staring in amazement. "Have a bite. Big guy, this is a gift from the gods." Brutus took it carefully, ignoring the heat, and took a bite. In that instant, time seemed to stand still. I watched as this burly man, over 2 meters tall, tensed every muscle in his body, and tears of emotion actually welled up in his bull-like eyes. The rich layers of flavor, the ultimate satisfaction from the carbohydrates, and the perfect blend of fat with sweet and sour notes directly overwhelmed the caveman's underdeveloped taste buds. Roar! Brutus threw his head back and let out a roar that shook the mountains and forests. This was definitely not anger. It was a roar of pure, soul-stirring ecstasy. It's so delicious. I've never eaten anything this amazing." He wolfed down that huge slice of pizza in just a few bites, even licking the tomato sauce right off his rough fingers. The beastmen around her couldn't hold back any longer. They pounced like hungry wolves, snatching up slices of pizza and shoving them into their mouths. Roxy managed to grab a slice too, and as she took her first bite, her fluffy cat ears perked up with pleasure, and her tail wagged happily behind her. It's nothing short of a miracle. A great miracle. Old man Grok didn't even have time to eat. He ripped the white bone mask off his face, fell to his knees with a thud before me, and, with tears streaming down his face, kissed the dirt at my feet. As my dad moved, Brutus swallowed the last crumb of pizza and gave me a deep look. This proud Minotaur warrior slowly bent one knee and bowed his massive head. Immediately afterward, Roxy along with all the orc warriors in the camp knelt before me, completely convinced. Praise the heavens. Praise the bringer of supreme delicacies. Old Grok raised his staff high, his voice echoing through the night sky. From this day forward, you are the supreme guide of our tribe, our new shaman. I stood in the glow of the fire, feeling the evening breeze brush against my thighs. I was wearing nothing but my underwear, and I finally let out a huge sigh of relief. Great Jax. The Los Angeles workers' journey to promotion in another world got off to a perfect start, but I didn't have much time to celebrate. What happened early the next morning taught me a hard lesson in this wild and untamed land. Knowing how to bake pizza is nowhere near enough. Overnight, I went from being a turkey to a deity. When I woke up, I found myself in the largest and most spacious animal skin tent in the entire camp. It even had a bed covered with the soft fur of some unknown giant beast. I stretched and yawned. As soon as I stepped out of the tent, I saw 2 orc warriors standing on either side like door gods. The moment they spotted me, they immediately bowed respectfully and pounded their chests. Not far away, a few young orcs were chasing a wild boar-like creature all over the ground. If you ignored their terrifying appearance and the intense, primal aura surrounding them, this place actually felt a lot like a rural summer camp. System, bring up the panel, I thought to myself. A translucent, pale blue screen that only I could see popped up. Host, Jax Miller role, Shatterbone Tribe Shaman reputation, 5001000, some prestige available funds, 100 gold in debt. 1 daily interest unlocked technology, beginner cooking quest, resolve the tribe's imminent survival crisis. Reward, pig iron smelting blueprint X1, 500 gold coins. When I saw that negative balance in the funds column, I couldn't help but roll my eyes. This damn system, even after I've traveled through time, it still won't let me escape the harsh realities of capitalism. Great Shaman, you're awake, said Roxy as she glided over. Today she was wearing a form-fitting leather outfit that further accentuated her sultry figure. Her long leopard tail swished impatiently behind her, revealing that she was not in a good mood at the moment. Good morning, Roxy, I said, running my fingers through my bedhead. Did something happen? You look like you're ready to pick a fight at any moment. It's Brutus, Roxy said in a low voice, her amber eyes filled with concern. He's a straight-talking guy. Although he was won over by your food yesterday, Early this morning, the warlike Black Wolf tribe next door sent someone to provoke us. Their chief mocked our tribe for letting a hairless monkey who can't even hold a bone knife steady serve as our shaman. The Black Wolf tribe. I furrowed my brow. Yes, they outnumber us 2 to 1. And their weapons are better. Their leader has challenged us to a duel. If we lose, we'll have to hand over half of our winter provisions. If we win, they'll retreat to their own territory. Roxy took a deep breath. Brutus has already agreed, but just now, while he was sharpening his bone club, he complained to me, saying that if you can't grant him the strength to defeat the enemy in the duel, then you're nothing more than a cook and you're not fit to lead the Bone Crusher tribe. My heart sank suddenly. These barbarians with muscles for brains, in their eyes, miracles might cause a momentary stir, but real, raw military might is the ultimate measure of status. If Brutus lost, my authority as the new shaman would crumble instantly and I might even end up back on the roasting spit. When does the duel start? I asked in a low voice. When the sun was directly overhead, on the open field outside the camp. I glanced up at the sky. There was probably about an hour left. My mind was racing, and the quest reward for the pig iron smelting blueprint in the system was flashing frantically in my mind like a beacon. Weapons. Brutus needs a weapon that will utterly dominate this era. And bone clubs and stones are nothing but a joke when faced with real metal. Roxy, listen up. I grabbed her by the shoulders and looked her straight in the eyes. Right now, take some people to the riverbed or the base of the mountain near the camp and find me a certain kind of rock. It's dark red, feels much heavier than ordinary rocks, and may have a rust-like color on the surface. Find as many as you can, the sooner, the better. Roxy paused for a moment, although she didn't understand what I meant. Seeing the serious look on my face, she immediately nodded and turned to run off. For the next hour, I completely transformed into a foreman. I had the remaining orcs dig a deep pit in the open field and build an extremely rudimentary semi-underground blast furnace out of yellow clay and stones, to ensure the temperature remained high. I had them chop down a large quantity of the thickest hardwoods, and even dismantle several worn-out animal hide tents to make 2 enormous bellows. As the sun approached its zenith, Roxy and a dozen or so warriors ran back, panting heavily. They were carrying a pile of heavy, dark red stonish hematite ore. Way to go, girl, I shouted excitedly. Smash all those rocks, the more you break them, the better. I filled the blast furnace layer by layer with crushed iron ore and charcoal, then lit the fire at the bottom. Brutus, I bellowed at the Minotaur who was making his pre-battle preparations not far away. Come here, bring your 2 strongest brothers, and stomp the hell out of these 2 bodies. Don't stop. Brutus didn't want to pay any attention to me at first, but when he saw the fervor in my eyes, he hesitated for a moment, then tossed aside his bone club and led his men onto the bellows. Huff puff, as the massive high-covered bellows worked frantically, the temperature inside the blast furnace soared, and the flames gradually changed from a bright yellow to a blinding white-hot glow. The surrounding air was heated to the point of distortion, and the heat was overwhelming. It was time for the duel. A defiant howl of wolves echoed from outside the camp. The Black Wolf tribe had arrived. Shaman, we're running out of time. Roxy looked anxiously toward the edge of the camp. Wait a little longer. I stared intently at the outlet at the bottom of the blast furnace. Finally, the system emitted a heavenly sound. Ding. Conditions met. Mission complete. Reward has been issued. The moment the beep sounded, a dazzling flash of golden light flashed through my mind. Every detail about the ancient methods of smelting and forging pig iron was instantly etched into my memory. Smash open the discharge port, I shouted. An orc violently pierced the mud seal with a long pole. In an instant, a stream of bright yellow molten iron radiating terrifying heat gushed out like a miniature lava waterfall, flowing down a pre-dug mud channel into a simple, elongated mold. Everyone was stunned. They had never seen a rock turn into a high-temperature liquid that flowed like water. I didn't waste a single second. As soon as the molten iron cooled slightly and solidified into a dark red, elongated iron ingot, I had 2 orcs use wooden sticks wrapped in thick, damp leaves to pull it out and toss it onto a huge, flat rock. Brutus, I pointed at the red-hot iron ingot, my voice reverberating through the scorching air. This is the power the gods have bestowed upon you. With all your might, use that worthless bone club of yours and smash it hard. Flatten it. Shape it into a blade. Brutus froze, but as he stared at that mysterious red object radiating terrifying heat, the warrior's blood within him was thoroughly ignited. He let out a wild roar, raised the thick, sturdy bone club, and brought it crashing down hard on the iron ingot. Clang! A loud, crisp clang of metal echoed throughout the camp. Keep going. Hit it. Hit it hard. I roared from the sidelines like a crazed cheerleader. As Brutus's heavy blows rained down, I used my knowledge of the system to guide him in adjusting his angle. That rough iron ingot, through a series of deafening hammer blows, was gradually stretched and thinned until it finally took the form of a single-edged cleaver 1 meter long and 2 fingers wide with a rugged design that still exuded a deadly chill. Put it in the water. Whoosh! When the red-hot machete was thrown into the water barrel nearby, a huge cloud of white steam rose into the air. I stepped forward and pulled the freshly forged primitive iron knife out of the water, although its surface was pitted and it hadn't been finely polished. Its cold weight and sharp edge made it practically a nuclear weapon-level weapon in an era that hadn't even seen bronze artifacts yet. I handed the iron knife to Brutus, who was panting and looked utterly stunned. "Go on, my warrior." I patted his muscular chest, a cold smile curving my lips. "Go show those fools who are still playing with bones and stones what true power really is." Outside the camp, the members of the Black Wolf tribe were already growing impatient. The enemy leader was a gaunt but extremely formidable werewolf named Scarface. He had a terrifying scar on his face that stretched from the corner of his left eye all the way down to his chin. And he was twirling a sharp bone blade in his hand, one that had been carved from the tooth of some enormous beast. Behind him stood 50 or 60 tattooed werewolf warriors, baring their teeth and snarling. When Brutus walked out of the camp carrying the freshly forged black iron dagger, Scarface froze for a moment, then burst into unrestrained laughter. "Brutus, has that hairless monkey messed with your head?" Scarface pointed his bone blade at the strange black weapon in Brutus's hand, one so dark it barely reflected light. "You're challenging me to a duel with a charred black wooden stick. Is the Bone Shatter tribe so poor you can't even find a single bone anymore?" The warriors of the Black Wolf tribe followed with a shrill, mocking cackle. Brutus said nothing. He took a deep breath, savoring the wonderful balance and substantial weight of this new weapon in his hands. It was lighter than the bone club he was used to, but for some reason, holding it gave him a solid sense of being able to tear through anything. The duel begins. No small talk. No referee, this is the law of the jungle in its purest form. Scarface moved as fast as lightning, lunging suddenly at Brutus. His speed was incredible. The bone blade in his hand traced a ghastly arc in the sunlight, heading straight for Brutus's throat. This was his signature move, both swift and ruthless. Based on past experience, Brutus would have swung his heavy bone club to block the attack, then used his strength to counter. But this time, just as Scarface closed in, Brutus suddenly remembered what I'd shouted in his ear. "Meet the blow with your blade. Don't dodge, just slash." Brutus let out a roar, gripped the hilt of his sword with both hands, and instead of blocking the blow, swung his arm in a wide arc straight at Scarface's bone blade, bringing the sword down with a vicious downward slash. Click! A sharp, teeth-grinding crack rang out clearly across the entire clearing. Time seemed to stand still at that moment. The savage grin on Scarface's face froze instantly. The hard bone blade made from animal fangs, which he took such pride in, and which had slit the throats of countless prey, was easily avid in two like rotten wood the instant it made contact with that black stick. The iron blade's momentum showed no sign of slowing. With terrifying force, it not only severed the bone blade but also sliced through the leather armor Scarface took such pride in, leaving a horrific, bone-deep gash across his chest. If Scarface hadn't instinctively taken a half-step back at the last moment, that slash would have been enough to cut him in half. Splash! Scarface screamed as he was flung backward, crashing heavily to the ground. Blood from his chest instantly stained the dirt red. He stared in horror at the bare hilt in his hand, now only half its original size, and then looked at the black weapon in Brutus's hand, which didn't even have a notch. As if it were a monster, the entire venue fell silent. The warriors of the Black Wolf tribe were like a flock of ducks with their throats collectively squeezed shut. The mocking laughter came to an abrupt halt. Their proud chieftain, had he really been unable to last even a single exchange? His weapon severed as easily as cutting through butter. The power bestowed by the gods. Brutus raised the blood-stained iron blade high and let out a wild, ecstatic roar to the heavens. "Shaman! Shaman! Shaman!" A thunderous roar of cheers erupted from the Shattered Bone tribe. Roxy's little face flushed with excitement. And old man Grok even dropped to his knees and bowed his head repeatedly in my direction, standing on high ground in the camp. I smiled as I looked down upon it all. The absolute dominance of iron weapons over bone weapons was not merely a victory of weapons, but a dimension-lowering strike from a higher level of civilization. Scarface clutched the wound on his chest as several of his henchmen helped him to his feet, looking terrified. The arrogance that had previously filled his gaze as he looked at Brutus was gone, replaced by nothing but deep fear. "We concede defeat." Scarface gritted his teeth and managed to force the words out. "According to the rules, the loser must hand over half of their supplies. Get back to your territory." Brutus brandished his iron blade, looking every bit the god of war. The members of the Black Wolf tribe fled, slinking away like stray dogs. This duel has made my status as the hairless monkey in the Shattered Bone tribe as solid as a rock. If the pizza on the first day made them bow to my magic, then today's iron knife has filled them with awe and reverence for me. But I know that better days won't come that easily. On the evening of the third day after the duel ended, just as the entire tribe was gathered around the campfire, relishing the roasted meat I had taught them to prepare with salt and herbs, the earth began to shake without warning. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy, slow footsteps echoed from deep within the dense forest to the north of the camp. With every step, even the flames on the campfire trembled violently. The cracking sounds of falling trees blended into a continuous roar, as if some massive bulldozer were plowing straight toward our camp, heedless of the terrain. "It's that thing!" Old Grok dropped the roast he was holding onto the ground. His face went pale, and he shook like a leaf. "The mountain troll. The mountain troll from the prophecy has awakened." Brutus jumped to his feet and gripped the iron dagger in his hand tightly. But large beads of cold sweat were beading on his forehead. Roxy immediately drew her dagger and stepped in front of me to protect me. In the faint moonlight, I could make out the monster that had smashed through the outer wooden fence and appeared at the edge of the camp. It was a terrifying beast as tall as a 4-story building. It resembled a mutated giant bear walking on 2 legs, but instead of fur, its body was covered with a thick layer of gray, granite-like scales. 2 massive fangs jutted from its lower jaw, and its blood-red eyes glowed with a savage light in the darkness of the night. This isn't something a halfort could possibly handle. It's a walking CGI monster straight out of a horror movie. The troll roared and casually swung its massive claw was big as a door, shattering a hide tent and the rocks beside it into dust. Its blood-red eyes scanned the area, finally locking onto the panicked crowd. "Run, everyone! Scatter and run into the woods!" Brutus roared, preparing to lead his tribe in retreat. Facing a monster of this caliber, even iron blades were useless. Its stone-like scales were strong enough to deflect any attack, but I didn't move. My gaze was fixed on a clearing along the troll's path. There lay a massive trap that I'd had the orcs dig out yesterday on a whim to test the durability of the iron equipment. It was lined with thick, sharpened hardwood stakes, and several large jars of animal fat had been tipped over at the bottom. This was originally intended to deal with a large-scale enemy invasion, but now, we'll just have to try anything that might work. Brutus, Roxy. I shoved the girl with animal ears who was shielding me aside and shouted, "Don't run. Lure it into that open area over there." "Shaman, have you lost your mind? That's a death sentence," Roxy cried out in panic. "Trust me." I pointed to my own eyes and, once again using the 500 gold coins I'd earned as a reward for completing a previous mission, exchanged them for a crucial item in the system store. A black metal cylinder appeared out of thin air in my hand, a modern military flare. "Throw it over there, then close your eyes." I pulled the pin and, with all my might, hurled the flare high into the sky above the troll's head. Outside the camp, the members of the Black Wolf tribe were already growing impatient. The enemy leader was a gaunt but extremely formidable werewolf named Scarface. He had a terrifying scar on his face that stretched from the corner of his left eye all the way down to his chin. And he was twirling a sharp bone blade in his hand, one that had been carved from the tooth of some enormous beast. Behind him stood 50 or 60 tattooed werewolf warriors, baring their teeth and snarling. When Brutus walked out of the camp carrying the freshly forged black iron dagger, Scarface froze for a moment, then burst into unrestrained laughter. "Brutus, has that hairless monkey messed with your head?" Scarface pointed his bone blade at the strange, blackened weapon in Brutus's hand, one that didn't even catch the light, Yuri, challenging me to a duel with a charred black wooden stick. "Is the Bone Shatter tribe so poor you can't even find a single bone anymore?" The warriors of the Black Wolf tribe followed with a shrill, mocking cackle. Brutus said nothing. He took a deep breath, savoring the wonderful balance and substantial weight of this new weapon in his hands. It was lighter than the bone club he was used to, but for some reason, holding it gave him a solid sense of being able to tear through anything. The duel begins. No small talk. No referee. This is the law of the jungle in its purest form. Scarface moved as fast as lightning, lunging suddenly at Brutus. His speed was incredible. The bone blade in his hand traced a pale arc in the sunlight, heading straight for Brutus's throat. This was his signature killing move, both swift and ruthless. Based on past experience, Brutus would have swung his heavy bone club to block the attack, then used his strength to counter. But this time, just as Scarface closed in, Brutus suddenly remembered what I'd shouted in his ear. "Meet the blow with your blade. Don't dodge, just slash." Brutus let out a roar, gripped the hilt of his sword with both hands, and instead of blocking the blow, swung his arm in a wide arc straight at Scarface's bone blade, bringing the sword down with a vicious downward slash. Click! A sharp, teeth-grinding crack rang out clearly across the entire clearing. Time seemed to stand still at that moment. The savage grin on Scarface's face froze instantly. The hard bone blade made from animal fangs, which he took such pride in, and which had slit the throats of countless prey, was easily avid and too like rotten wood the instant it made contact with that black stick. The iron blade's momentum showed no sign of slowing. With terrifying force, it not only severed the bone blade but also sliced through Scarface's prized leather armor, leaving a horrific gash across his chest that cut deep enough to expose the bone. If Scarface hadn't instinctively taken a half step back at the last moment, that slash would have been enough to cut him in half. Splash! Scarface screamed as he was flung backward, crashing heavily to the ground. Blood from his chest instantly stained the dirt red. He stared in horror at the bare hilt in his hand, now only half its original size, and then looked at the black weapon in Brutus's hand, which didn't even have a notch. As if it were a monster, the entire venue fell silent. The warriors of the Black Wolf tribe were like a flock of ducks with their throats collectively squeezed shut. The mocking laughter came to an abrupt halt. Their proud chieftain had he really been unable to last even a single exchange. His weapon severed as easily as cutting through butter. The power bestowed by the gods. Brutus raised the blood-stained iron blade high and let out a wild, ecstatic roar to the heavens. Shaman! 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 A thunderous roar of cheers erupted from the shattered bone tribe. Roxy's little face flushed with excitement. And old man Grok even dropped to his knees and bowed his head repeatedly in my direction, standing on high ground in the camp. I smiled as I looked down upon it all. The absolute dominance of iron weapons over bone weapons was not merely a victory of weapons, but a dimension-lowering strike from a higher level of civilization. Scarface clutched the wound on his chest as several of his henchmen helped him to his feet. Looking terrified, the look in his eyes as he gazed at Brutus no longer held any trace of his former arrogance. All that remained was deep fear. We concede defeat. Scarface gritted his teeth and managed to force the words out. According to the rules, the loser must hand over half of their supplies. Get back to your territory. Brutus brandished his iron blade, looking every bit the god of war. The members of the Black Wolf tribe fled, slinking away like stray dogs. This duel has made my status as the hairless monkey in the shattered bone tribe as solid as a rock. If the pizza on the first day made them bow to my magic, then today's iron knife has filled them with awe and reverence for me. But I know that better days won't come that easily. On the evening of the third day after the duel ended, just as the entire tribe was gathered around the campfire, relishing the roasted meat I had taught them to prepare with salt and herbs, the earth began to shake without warning. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy, slow footsteps echoed from deep within the dense forest to the north of the camp. With every step, even the flames on the campfire trembled violently. The cracking sounds of falling trees blended into a continuous roar, as if some massive bulldozer were plowing straight toward our camp. Heedless of the terrain, it's that thing. Old Grok dropped the roast he was holding onto the ground. His face went pale, and he shook like a leaf. The mountain troll from the prophecy has awakened. Brutus jumped to his feet and gripped the iron dagger in his hand tightly, but large beads of cold sweat were beating on his forehead. Roxy immediately drew her dagger and stepped in front of me to protect me. In the faint moonlight, I could make out the monster that had smashed through the outer wooden fence and appeared at the edge of the camp. It was a terrifying beast as tall as a 4-story building. It resembled a mutated giant bear walking on 2 legs, but instead of fur, its body was covered with a thick layer of gray, granite-like scales. 2 massive fangs jutted from its lower jaw, and its blood-red eyes glowed with a savage light in the darkness of the night. This isn't something a halfer could possibly handle. It's a walking CGI monster straight out of a horror movie. The troll roared and casually swung its massive claw was big as a door, shattering a hide tent and the rocks beside it into dust. Its blood-red eyes scanned the area, finally locking onto the panicked crowd. Run, everyone! Scatter and run into the woods! Brutus roared, preparing to lead his tribe in retreat. Against a monster of this caliber, even iron blades were useless. Its stone-like scales were strong enough to deflect any attack, but I didn't move. My gaze was fixed on a clearing along the troll's path. There lay a massive trap that I'd had the orcs dig out yesterday on a whim to test the durability of the iron equipment. It was filled with thick, sharpened hardwood stakes, and several large jars of animal fat had been poured onto the bottom. This was originally intended to deal with a large-scale enemy invasion, but now, we'll just have to try anything that might work. Brutus, Roxy. I shoved the girl with animal ears who was shielding me aside and shouted, "Don't run. Lure it into that open area over there." Shaman, have you lost your mind? That's a death sentence. Roxy cried out in panic. Trust me. I pointed to my own eyes and, once again using the 500 gold coins I'd earned as a reward for completing a previous mission, exchanged them for a crucial item in the system store. A black metal cylinder appeared out of thin air in my hand, a modern military flare. Throw it over there, then close your eyes. I pulled the pin and, with all my might, hurled the flare high into the sky above the troll's head. Bang! As the flare exploded in midair, a blinding, ghastly white light instantly illuminated the entire camp, making it as bright as day. Roar! The mountain troll let out a piercing scream, as a prehistoric beast that had spent its entire life in dark caves or the depths of dense forests. Its eyes were extremely sensitive to bright light. The sudden, blinding glare felt like a red-hot sword piercing straight through its retina. In agony, it covered its eyes and, like a drunken giant, began wildly flailing its massive claws about. Now's the time, Brutus. Provoke it. I shouted at the top of my lungs. Although Brutus was also blinded by the bright light, he had developed an instinctive obedience to my commands. With his eyes closed, relying solely on sound, he struck the iron knife in his hand with all his might, producing a crisp clang of metal, and let out a defiant battle cry. You clumsy stone pig. Come and catch me. The blind mountain troll was thoroughly enraged by this minor provocation. Following the sound, it roared and took a stride with its massive legs, charging blindly and furiously toward Brutus. Boom crack. The troll's massive body stepped right into the clearing. Its enormous weight instantly crushed the camouflaging branches and dirt. It didn't even have time to react before it plummeted straight into the giant trap 10 meters deep and lined with sharp hardwood stakes. A piercing scream echoed through the sky, although the sharpened hardwood stakes couldn't pierce its hard, stone-like scales. Dozens of them had lodged themselves in the soft crevices of its joints and abdomen. The immense momentum had pinned it firmly to the bottom of the pit, making it impossible for it to break free in the short term. As the blinding light gradually faded, the tribe's beast men gathered around, still shaken by the ordeal, and gazed with awe at the colossal creature at the bottom of the pit, which was still thrashing wildly and roaring like thunder. Great Shaman. Is that it? Brutus looked at the trap and swallowed hard. It's not over yet. Its scales are too thick, the wooden stake won't kill it. By the time it recovers and crawls out, we'll all be dead. I stared coldly at the bottom of the pit. System. Exchange for 2 barrels of high-purity alcohol. And throw in a high-pressure ignition gun. I quickly issued the command in my mind. I still had a few hundred gold coins left over from the previous mission's rewards, enough to take care of this big, clumsy bear. Ding. Redemption successful. 200 gold coins have been deducted. The next second, 2 heavy metal buckets and an extravagantly designed ignition gun appeared out of thin air in my hands. Roxy, pour these 2 buckets into the pit, pour it all over it. Without a moment's hesitation, Roxy grabbed the metal bucket and rushed to the edge of the pit. The acrid smell of alcohol filled the air instantly. The troll in the pit seemed to sense the danger and began struggling even more violently. I raised the cyberpunk-style high-voltage ignition gun and aimed it at the bottom of T.He pit. In this era, in addition to iron, I've brought another work of art, one called Modern Firepower. I pulled the trigger, and a streak of deep blue, high-temperature flame shot out. Boom! A deafening explosion rang out. The high-purity alcohol, mixed with the animal fat that had been spread across the bottom of the pit, triggered a terrifying explosion the moment it came into contact with the open flame. In an instant, the entire trap was transformed into a massive crater that shot skyward. The blue and yellow flames instantly engulfed the mountain troll's massive body. Not even its stone-like scales could withstand the scorching heat of several thousand degrees. The troll let out a desperate, agonized howl and rolled frantically in the pit of fire. But the more it struggled, the more fiercely the flames raged. The air was thick with the nauseating smell of burning flesh. The fire raged for more than half an hour. When the flames finally died down, all that remained at the bottom of the pit was a massive charred skeleton, still emitting wisps of blue smoke. A deathly silence fell over the entire shattered bone tribe. All the orcs, including Brutus and Old Man Grok, looked at me with the same reverence one would reserve for a true god. If conjuring food was a blessing and forging iron was a miracle, then the blazing flames that had just descended like divine retribution were undeniably the power of a god. Ding. The host has been detected defeating a prehistoric overlord of a higher tier. Reputation points have increased significantly. Ding. Reputation has reached 10001000, and clan loyalty has reached diehard. New perk unlocked. Financial Empire Starter Module. As I listened to the system prompt in my head and looked at the orcs kneeling all around me, my mind was busy calculating something else entirely. The crisis has been averted, but the tribe's fundamental problems remain unresolved. These orcs are accustomed to a hunter-gatherer lifestyle where they never know when their next meal will come. As long as they've bagged a single prey, they'll lie in the grass basking in the sun for 3 days, only going out to hunt again when they're starving. This primitive, idle way of life is simply not enough to support my efforts to build a powerful empire, let alone defend against any more prehistoric monsters that might appear in the future. I need to get them moving on their own. I need them to work like crazy for me. Early the next morning, I gathered all the adult orcs from the tribe in the square. My people. I stood on a high stone platform, juggling a gleaming gold coin generated by the system. The gods of the heavens are pleased with the courage you showed last night. Therefore, I have decided to bestow upon you a blessing greater than food and weapons: financial freedom. A murmur of confusion rose from below. Great Shaman. What is purple oil from the wooden hut? Is it edible? Brutus asked, scratching his massive bull's head with a dazed look on his face. You fools. This is even better than food. I held up the gold coin. See this. It's called a gold coin, a form of currency recognized by the gods. Starting today, the tribe will no longer operate under the communal dining system. Any game you hunt, fruit you gather, or iron or you mine, you can bring it all to me to exchange for gold coins. I pointed to several large wooden crates that had been set out nearby. With gold coins, you can buy all kinds of amazing things from me. For example, that delicious pizza from yesterday, just 5 gold coins. A sharp iron knife, 20 gold coins. Even the softest animal skin beds and the sweetest fruit wine. As I watched their eyes gradually light up, I threw out the ultimate bait. As long as you work hard and earn enough gold coins, you can eat pizza, drink fruit wine, and lie in a comfortable bed every day without having to do a thing. That's what we call financial freedom. The entire arena fell deathly silent. Then, an unprecedented fervor flared up in the eyes of all the orcs. Exactly who would want to risk their life hunting when they can just lie around eating delicious pizza every day? Praise the gods. Praise the shamans. Hurry up. Go hunting. Go mining. I want gold coins. I want to eat 10 slices of pizza. Brutus was the first to leap to his feet. He grabbed his iron knife and charged into the woods, followed by his warriors, whose eyes gleamed like those of hungry wolves. Even the few old orcs who were usually the laziest shuffled off, carrying their bamboo baskets to gather wild berries. I sat on the stone platform, looking out at the camp that had suddenly become deserted, a sly, capitalist grin curving my lips. Welcome to Wall Street in the Stone Age, my workers. In just one short month, the Shattered Bone tribe went from being a gathering of primitive people just scraping by to becoming the Wall Street of the Stone Age. I have to say, the harsh realities of capitalism and the temptations of consumerism are universal truths across the entire universe. Ever since I threw out that big lie about financial freedom, this group of muscular halfworks has practically turned into tireless workhorses. Every day before dawn, Brutus would lead his mining squad shouldering the new iron pickaxes I'd forged for them as they charged toward the hematite vein at the foot of the mountain, howling all the way. Meanwhile, Old Man Glock organized the tribe's elders and children into an assembly line, frantically gathering all kinds of berries and medicinal herbs. As for the hunting party, they wouldn't let even a single prehistoric field mouse slip by them these days. The place where I live now has gone from a drafty animal skin tent to a luxurious, stand-alone log cabin built with sturdy logs. I leaned back in a lounge chair covered with a top-quality saber-toothed tiger pelt, holding a glass of happy water on the rocks, a chilled Coke I'd redeemed from the system store, and let out a contented burp. Boss, here's today's revenue report. Roxy sashayed over, swaying her hips like a water snake. She's now my chief financial officer. Using the thread and a few pieces of high-quality silk smooth animal hide I'd exchanged through the system, I had a form-fitting, hip-hugging skirt custom-made for her, paired with her cat ears and swaying leopard tail. She's simply the sexiest, most stunning secretary in the Stone Age. She handed me a wooden board covered with symbols. Today, the hunting party turned in 3 giant antlered deer. The mining team brought back 2,000 gene of hematite ore, and the gathering team delivered 500 baskets of berries. Based on the exchange rate you set, we distributed a total of 300 gold coins. I nodded in satisfaction. This economic loop was simply perfect. The vast amount of supplies they had risked their lives to obtain was secretly converted by me into high-value points within the system. Then, using a negligible amount of those points, I exchanged them for cheap physical gold coins to distribute to them. But what good are gold coins if they don't circulate? So, right next to this little cabin, I opened Jaxson's supermarket. Great Shaman, I'm here to make a purchase. The door to the log cabin swung open, and Brutus walked in, drenched in sweat. He slapped 50 gold coins down on the table with a flourish, his eyes fixed intently on the thick-rimmed glasses perched on the bridge of my nose. I'll take that coolness gadget you're wearing on your face. Plus 2 supreme deep dish meat-loaded pizzas, and a bottle of that bubbly black stuff. This minotaur was now spouting all the modern slang I'd taught him, with a smile. I handed him those cheap plastic sunglasses which actually only cost 10 system credits and asked Roxy to grab some pizza and Coke from the kitchen. Brutus, you're the tribe's top worker. As long as you keep up this mining pace, you'll save up enough money next year to buy that spring-loaded Simmons bed at the supermarket and achieve true financial freedom. I patted him on the shoulder and painted a rosy picture for him. Brutus put on the sunglasses which were a little too small for him and nodded excitedly. Praise the boss. I'll go level that mountain right away. Watching his back as he dashed off like he'd been injected with adrenaline, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. These simple, primitive people have no idea that as long as I'm the one holding the money-printing machine, their so-called financial freedom will forever remain nothing more than a carrot dangling just out of reach. Ding. Congratulations, host. Your system account balance has exceeded 100,000 points. The requirements for upgrading the tribe's infrastructure have been met. The notification sound in my head put me in a great mood. These 100,000 points are more than enough to upgrade my entire tribe's defenses and weaponry to a whole new level. Just as I was about to open the in-game store to go on a shopping spree, the door to the log cabin suddenly burst open. An orc scout who had been on patrol on the outskirts stumbled in. He was covered in blood, with 2 rough bone arrows lodged in his back. He was clearly seriously wounded. Oh no. Great Shaman, the scout coughed up blood in great gushes, his voice hoarse. The cannibals, the bloodthirsty tribe. They've seen the thick smoke from our blast furnace and smelled the aroma of food. Butcher Terry, with his massive army, is coming to slaughter us. I jumped to my feet, and the Coke in my hand fell to the ground and shattered. On this wild and untamed continent, the faster wealth accumulates, the more ferocious the predators that are drawn to it become. The real war is finally about to begin. No sooner had the scout finished speaking than his eyes rolled back, and he passed out completely. Roxy's face went deathly pale in an instant. Even her leopard tail, which she usually loved to swish about, drooped stiffly. It's Butcher Terry, she bit her lip. her voice betraying her unmasked fear. Boss, the bloodthirsty tribe is the most terrifying scourge in these wilds. They don't farm, they don't mine, and they hardly ever hunt. They survive solely by raiding other tribes. Terry is a complete man. Rumor has it he once ate a baby saber-toothed tiger raw. Their numbers are definitely over 1,000. I stepped outside and looked in the direction Roxy was pointing, on the distant horizon. A cloud of yellow sand was already billowing into the sky. The deep, wild beat of the war drums made from animal bones carried on the wind like a death knell. Thud thud thud. Each beat struck a chord in everyone's heart. The beastmen at the camp, who just moments ago had been immersed in the joys of consumerism and dreaming of financial freedom, were now all gripped by sheer panic. The elderly and children who had been waiting in line to buy pizza scrambled back inside their homes in fear. And the warriors who had been heading out with their pickaxes to work extra shifts mining also stopped in their tracks. Brutus was still clutching the pair of frog-shaped goggles he just bought. He hurried over to me, his massive frame trembling slightly. Great Shaman. There are far too many enemies. Even if we count the elderly, the weak, and the infirm, our tribe has fewer than 200 men fit for battle. What if we hand over those iron tools and food in exchange for a chance to live? Hand it over. I whipped my head around and stared at this muscular hunk who stood over 2 meters tall as if he were an idiot. Cut the crap. I slapped the back of Brutus's iron blade so hard it made his wrist go numb. Do you know what it's called back home when someone breaks into your yard with a weapon to steal your stuff? It's called trespassing on private property. We have castle law. The original Wall Street I built with my own blood, sweat, and tears. The financial freedom you all earned through blood, sweat, and tears. Are you just going to hand it over to a bunch of man-eating hicks like that? I leaped onto the wooden table piled high with gold coins, surveyed the panicked orc warriors around me, and raised my voice to shout. Tell me, do you want to go back to those days when you never knew where your next meal was coming from and spent every day wallowing in the mud? No way. Several young orcs shouted instinctively. Do you want those man-eating wolves to steal your pizza, sleep on your sealy mattresses, and hang your heads around their necks as decorations? Never. Brutus's eyes instantly turned red. He yanked his goggles onto his face, raised the single-edged iron dagger in his hand, and let out a deafening roar. Excellent. I snapped my fingers, my gaze turning icy cold. Since they want to rob us, we'll give them a vivid, groundbreaking lesson in self-defense. I closed my eyes and decisively brought up the system panel in my mind, looking at the system points that had just surpassed the 100,000 mark. I didn't feel the slightest bit of regret, and immediately went into war-buying mode. System. Redeem 200 sets of Spartan phalanx heavy armor for me, including solid iron shields and 3-meter-long high-carbon steel spears. Ding. 80,000 points have been deducted, and the equipment has been delivered to the system storage. Get me another 100 bottles of that special Molotov cocktail, the high-explosive incendiary bottles. Ding. 10,000 points deducted. The Molotov cocktail has been issued. With a sweeping gesture of my hand, a small mountain of metal instantly materialized out of thin air in the once empty square. It consisted of massive tower shields, large enough to shield an orc's entire body, their surfaces gleaming with the dull luster of cast iron. Beside them lay bundles of fine steel spears with razor-sharp tips, their blades glinting with a bloodthirsty chill in the sunlight. Everyone, drop the daggers and bone clubs in your hands. Put these on instead. I pointed to the gear on the ground and barked orders like a hot-tempered sergeant major. Brutus, you're in charge. I want you to form 2 lines. Press your shields tightly together like a wall, and thrust your spears through the gaps. No one is to take a single step back without my order. Although the beastmen had never seen such a strange formation before, their absolute obedience to me prompted them to spring into action immediately. In just 10 minutes, a steel defensive line composed of steel shields and spears arranged like a hedgehog was deployed at the entrance to the camp. Just then, the bloodthirsty tribe's army finally arrived. They were nothing short of a horde of demons from hell. More than 1,000 cannibal warriors, their bodies smeared with blindingly red blood and adorned with all manner of bone ornaments, surged toward our camp like a dark, surging tide. The crowd parted to either side, and a colossal giant nearly 3 meters tall and a full size larger than Brutus stepped forward. He carried a massive horse-slaying sword, crafted from the leg bone of some unknown giant beast, and wore a necklace made of human and orc skulls around his neck. This is Terry the Butcher. Terry cast a contemptuous glance at our steel formation, bared a mouthful of crooked, yellow teeth, and let out a cackling laugh that sounded like a broken bellows. That skinny monkey in sponge underwear is your new shaman. Hand over your iron tools and food. I might consider eating only half of you. Standing on a raised platform behind the wall of shields, I redeemed a Cuban cigar from the system, put it in my mouth, lit it with the high-voltage lighter, took a deep drag, and blew a smoke ring toward the 3-meter turtle monster. Welcome to my turf. I grinned, flashing a capitalist smile, ready to face a crushing defeat. Country bumpkin. Kill them all. Roast that skinny monkey to go with our drinks. Terry was thoroughly enraged by my contemptuous attitude. He raised that massive bone saber and let out a roar that shook the wilderness. 1,000 cannibal warriors from the bloodthirsty tribe, like a flood bursting its banks, roared and brandished their crude stone axes and bone clubs as they charged toward our defenses. The earth trembled beneath their feet, and the dust they kicked up nearly obscured the sun, facing an enemy 5 times their number. The Bone Shatter clan warriors in the front ranks were so tense that their breathing grew heavy. In the past, faced with such a charge, they would have long since broken ranks and fled. Hold your shields steady. Raise your spears. Brutus, wearing a pair of comical goggles, stood at the very center of the phalanx and roared in a voice like a bell. Think of your pizza. Think of your Sealy mattress. Anyone who dares take a single step back will have all their gold coins docked by the boss. This pre-battle rallying cry, steeped in strong capitalist overtones, proved surprisingly effective. The mere thought of losing their financial freedom instantly filled the soldiers' eyes with fury. 200 men braced their shoulders firmly against the heavy, solid iron tower shields, while 3-meter-long high-carbon steel spears jutted out from the gaps between the shields, forming a deadly forest of metal. Bang, 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 like waves crashing against an indestructible reef. The first wave of cannibal warriors slammed into the Spartan phalanx. A blood-curdling scream pierced the air. The cannibals, charging wildly, were unable to stop in time. Their immense momentum sent them straight onto the sharp, high-carbon steel spears. Rough animal hides and muscle were as fragile as paper against the refined steel, and blood instantly stained the ground in front of the shields red. As for the enemies who narrowly avoided the spearheads, their bone clubs and stone axes struck the pure iron tower shields. Aside from sending up a few sparks and cracking the skin on their palms from the impact, they were completely unable to inflict any substantial damage on the shattered bone tribe warriors hiding behind them. Stab. Retract. Stab again. Brutus commanded the troops with calm precision. With each command, a row of spears shot out like venomous snakes, claiming a swath of lives, before retracting in perfect unison to await the next attack. That is the true horror of this groundbreaking tactic. The tight formation, combined with metal armor, the pinnacle of cold weaponry, turned this battle into a one-sided massacre. Terry stood in the rear, watching helplessly as his men fell in row after row like wheat being cut down, his brutal eyes filled with disbelief. He couldn't understand why those gray staffs, which looked as if they would snap at the slightest touch, could so easily pierce the chests of his strongest warriors. You bunch of good-for-nothings, get out of my way. Terry let out a wild roar, shoved aside the henchmen blocking his path, and, dragging that massive bone saber, charged to the front lines himself. This 3-meter monster was nothing short of a human bulldozer. He leaped high into the air, gripping the massive bone knife tightly with both hands, and brought it down with the force of a mountain crashing down, slashing viciously at Brutus, who stood at the very center of the formation. Clank-click, after a deafening roar, his single stroke actually carved a deep gash into the solid iron tower shields on 3 sides. The 3 warriors holding the shields were knocked back by the immense force, spitting blood as they flew backward, and a gap instantly appeared in what had been a tightly sealed defensive line. Die, Terry snarled, preparing to charge into the formation and wreak havoc. Roxy, Bombardier, get ready, I shouted from the high platform, calmly holding my cigar between my teeth. Roxy led 50 of the most agile female beast-eared girls, each holding 2 Molotov cocktails filled with high-explosive fuel. Light it. Throw it. 50 Molotov cocktails arced through the air in deadly parabolic trajectories, landing precisely among Terry and the horde of cannibals behind him who were preparing to pour through the breach. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of shattering glass bottles rang out one after another. As soon as the specially formulated napalm came into contact with the air, it instantly erupted into a blazing inferno reaching thousands of degrees. This flame was extremely tenacious. Once it touched the skin, it was impossible to extinguish by simply slapping it away. Aya! The breach instantly turned into a living hell. More than a dozen cannibal warriors were instantly transformed into howling figures engulfed in flames. Terry's massive frame bore the brunt of the blast. His chest and arms were covered in burning napalm, and the excruciating pain made him let out a blood-curdling scream. He tried to roll around on the ground to put out the flames, but the sticky fire only burned more fiercely, even causing the bone necklace around his neck to crackle as it burned. Brutus, now's your chance. Plug the gap, I shouted. Brutus yanked off his goggles, raised the single-edged iron dagger in his hand, and, leading the reserve soldiers in the rear ranks, charged forward with a roar. Seizing the moment when Terry was rolling on the ground, he brought the dagger down with a vicious chop. Pfft. Terry's thick arm, clutching the bone knife, was severed clean off by Brutus. Dark red blood gushed out like a fountain. Having lost their leader and faced with incomprehensible, deadly weapons and unquenchable demonic flames, the remnants of the bloodthirsty tribe collapsed completely. Like a flock of frightened sheep, they discarded their armor and helmets, wailing and crying out in despair as they fled deep into the wilderness. The battle is over. The afterglow of the setting sun bathed the ravaged battlefield, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of blood and burning flesh. though the warriors of the Shattered Bone tribe were utterly exhausted. A fervent gleam of victory shone in each of their eyes. We had routed the most fearsome army of cannibals in the wilderness with virtually no casualties. I jumped down from the high platform, spat out the cigar butt from my mouth, and walked over to Terry the butcher, who was still writhing in agony. His massive body was burned beyond recognition, blood was still flowing from his severed arm, and his eyes were filled with extreme fear of the unknown. "You! What kind of monster are you, anyway?" Terry gasped with difficulty, his voice as faint as a mosquito's buzz. I crouched down, pulled a gleaming silver Desert Eagle from the system space, and tapped his charred cheek with the cold barrel. "I'm not a monster, Terry," I whispered in his ear, low enough that only he could hear. "I'm the ultimate capitalist who's about to rule this wilderness. And you're just a bad debt on my financial statements." Bang! Deafening gunshots echoed across the wilderness. The Desert Eagle's terrifying kinetic energy and recoil sent a wave of numbness through my wrist. Without a moment's hesitation, Terry's enormous head, like a rotten watermelon struck by an invisible sledgehammer, exploded instantly before everyone's eyes. A mixture of red and white filth splattered across the floor, and his massive, 3-meter-long headless corpse swayed briefly before finally collapsing heavily into a pool of blood. The entire venue fell silent. Even the sound of the wind seemed to have stopped. The remaining 200 or 300 bloodthirsty tribe prisoners who hadn't been able to escape because they were injured or trapped were now all so terrified they were shitting and pissing themselves. They stared in horror at the small silver chunk of metal in my hand, from which blue smoke was still rising, and one by one they fell to their knees with a thud, burying their heads deep in the mud, not even daring to breathe. In the eyes of these primitives, who don't even know how to use a bow and arrow, the blow I just landed was, without a doubt, the true wrath of the Thunder God. "Tie all these prisoners up." I holstered my Desert Eagle at my lower back and casually blew away the gunpowder smoke from the muzzle. "Starting today, there are war reparations contract workers for the Shattered Bones tribe." Brutus scratched his head, walked over, and asked, "Great Shaman, what's a contract worker? Wouldn't it be easier to just kill them or use them as emergency rations?" Frustrated that he wasn't living up to his potential, I kicked him. "All you ever do is eat. If we kill them, who's going to mine for us? Who's going to farm for us? These are 300 free, strong workers. Listen up. They owe our tribe a huge sum in compensation for emotional distress and for repairing our defenses. Until they've mined enough iron ore to pay off this debt, they'll eat nothing but the worst gruel every day and do the hardest labor. That's what we call re-education through labor." The beastmen nodded, seeming to understand only partially, but they had fully grasped the core idea. No need to do the dirty, backbreaking work themselves. And so, amid a chorus of jubilant shouts, 300 cannibal prisoners were fitted with rattan shackles, becoming the first batch of low-tier slaves. So, wait, I mean glorious contract workers in my capitalist empire. That night, in my luxurious cabin, I watched the numbers flashing wildly on the system panel and laughed so hard my mouth stretched all the way to the back of my head. Ding! Epic campaign victory. Defeated the regional overlord Bloodthirsty tribe, and reputation points have surpassed the limit. Ding! Received campaign reward, 500,000 system points. Ding! Civilization progress has advanced. Unlocking a new tech tree. Basic architecture. Basic cement production. Currency and financial system module. 500,000 points. I felt like I'd instantly gone from being a street vendor selling hot dogs to a Wall Street tycoon. With this massive sum of money and those 300 tireless, free workers, the Bonecrusher tribe's infrastructure development took off like a rocket. In just 1 month, the dilapidated camp, once nothing but mud and rotten wood, underwent a complete transformation. I exchanged the blueprints and ordered the prisoners to fire bricks and mix cement. In the center of the camp, row after row of uniform red brick bungalows rose from the ground, and right in the middle of these bungalows, I even went so far as to build a 2-story bone-crushing tribe central bank and real estate trading center. It's time to give these orcs, who've saved up a few gold coins, a taste of real-world capitalism. That afternoon, I gathered everyone in the tribe at the square in front of the trading center. "My people," I stood on the high platform, pointing to the row of brand-new red brick bungalows with glass windows behind me, and shouted through a megaphone. "Look at these sturdy, warm, and watertight marvelous houses. This is the Bone-Crushing Phase 1 luxury housing complex. Not only do they have the Springfield Simmons beds I promised earlier, but they even have private flush toilets." The crowd below instantly erupted into a frenzy. Over the past month, they had watched these red brick houses go up day by day, and they'd been drooling over them for ages. "Boss, how many gold coins for a set? I'll buy it. I'm heading out to mine right now," Brutus roared loudly, waving his iron pickaxe. I smiled slightly and held up 5 fingers. "Not much, just 1,000 gold coins." The entire room fell silent in an instant. 1,000 gold coins. Even if they worked their fingers to the bone for a month, they'd save up 20 or 30 at most. That was an astronomical figure. Seeing the look of disappointment in their eyes, I tossed out that poisoned carrot I'd been brewing for a while. However, the great gods, taking pity on your hardships, have specially launched a mortgage loan service. I drew a pie chart on a large blackboard. You don't need 1,000 gold coins, just hand over 50 gold coins as a down payment, and you can move into a big house tonight. The central bank will cover the remaining 950 gold coins for you up front. All you have to do is pay back a small portion of the principal each month over the next 30 years, plus a negligible amount of interest. The beastmen looked at one another in disbelief, in their limited understanding of math and logic. Being able to stay in a house worth 1,000 gold coins for just 50 gold coins was nothing short of a divine act of charity. I'll buy it. I want the biggest set. Brutus was the first to rush forward and slam all the gold coins from his pocket down on the table. I want one too. I want one too. Watching the orcs lining up like crazy to sign their 30-year indentures, that is, their home purchase contracts, I sat back in my genuine leather executive chair and leisurely took a sip of ice-cold Coke. Starting today, these orcs will no longer work just to put food on the table. They'll willingly become my lifelong labor machines, all to pay off their mortgages. However, just as I was reveling in the early success of my financial empire, danger crept up on me. At this very moment, on a towering snow-capped mountain hundreds of kilometers away from the Shattered Bone tribe, an elven scout, clad in light silver armor and with pointed ears, was riding on the back of a massive bipedal dragon. He held a monocular telescope that glowed with a blue magical aura, staring intently in the direction of the Shattered Bone tribe. There, thick black smoke billowed day and night from several blast furnaces, shooting straight up into the sky and standing out starkly against the backdrop of a vast, pristine green forest. By the mother of nature, the flames of an unknown civilization have actually appeared in the lands of those lowly halforcs. The elven scout lowered his telescope, a flash of icy murderous intent crossing his eyes. This filthy smoke, which desecrates nature, must be purified. We must report this immediately to His Excellency the Archmage. He gave the reins a sharp tug, and the flying dragon let out a piercing screech as it flapped its wings and soared toward the vast magical empire at the center of the continent. 3 months later, Phase 1 of the Shattered Bones luxury housing complex has sold out completely, and foundation work for Phase 2 is in full swing. To pay off their 30-year mortgages, the beastmen have channeled unprecedented enthusiasm into their work, voluntarily adopting 996 and even 007 work schedules. The entire Shattered Bones tribe has expanded into a heavily guarded industrial town. That afternoon, as I was lying in my office with its floor-to-ceiling windows, enjoying a massage from Roxy's paws, a piercing air raid siren suddenly rang out across the town. I pushed open the window. I saw that the once clear sky had turned an eerie, pale green, and a dozen or so enormous bipedal dragons were blocking out the sun as they circled above the small town. Standing on the back of the lead flying dragon was an elderly elf dressed in a magnificent robe and wielding a staff inlaid with a massive gemstone. He radiated a blinding magical glow, and his voice, like rumbling thunder, echoed throughout the entire camp. Filthy orcs, your vile black smoke has desecrated Mother Nature. I, Elrose, Archmage of the Elven Empire, shall today, on behalf of the forest, bestow upon you complete purification. As he chanted, dozens of massive meteors blazing with green flames suddenly materialized out of thin air in the sky, locking onto the town below with an aura of destruction. The beasts below froze for a second, then erupted into earth-shaking roars. It wasn't out of fear, but out of anger. Damn it! That huge rock was aimed right at my newly renovated house. I've only been paying my mortgage for 3 months. With tears in his eyes and not even dressed, Brutus rushed out onto the square, brandishing an iron knife. Defend the neighborhood. Defend our property. The beastmen, like dragons whose sore spots had been touched, frantically grabbed their weapons one after another. Great. That's the fighting spirit of a man with a mortgage. I exhaled a ring of smoke with satisfaction, casually pulled up the system panel, and maxed out the massive amount of points amounting to 1 million that I'd accumulated over the past few months. System. Redeem 3 phalanx Closian weapon systems, and send another 100 RPG launchers to the residents downstairs. Ding. 800. 000 points deducted. Modern heavy firepower has been deployed. Archmage Elrose looked down at the angry but overconfident orcs below, let out a contemptuous sneer, and waved his staff. Die, you barbaric ants. Open fire, I ordered calmly. Bzzz. 3 phalanx Closian weapon systems mounted on the roof fired up instantly, unleashing thousands of armor-piercing incendiary rounds per minute that wove together into 3 blinding trails of metallic fire, shooting straight up into the sky. Those dozens of magical meteorites, which looked capable of bringing about the end of the world, were blasted into a cloud of dust midair the moment they came into contact with the modern metal storm. Just like tofu, a cold smile froze on Elrose's face. Before he could even react, the frenzied orc homeowners below, determined to defend their properties, had already shouldered their RPG launchers. For the mortgage. Die. Point years. Brutus pulled the trigger. Hundreds of rocket-propelled grenades, leaving trails in their wake like a meteor shower flying backward, blew the two-legged flying dragon in the sky to smithereens. In the face of this modern industrial monster, a perfect fusion of firearms and capital, the so-called classical magical empire was as fragile as a joke. 10 minutes later, the arrogant archmage Elrose, his body charred black and barely clothed, was tied to my desk. His 2 flying dragons had already been turned into game meat, now roasting in the kitchen. You! What kind of demon are you, exactly? Elrose looked at me in despair, his worldview completely shattered. Me. I'm just an investor who's brought advanced civilization to this continent. I took a thick parchment contract out of the drawer and slid it toward him. Take a look at this. Since your elven empire has destroyed the greenery in our neighborhood and caused panic among the residents, you'll have to compensate us. Please sign this magical technology transfer agreement and this elven labor dispatch contract. I plan to build a magic-powered thermal power plant right next to your tree of life. Of course, I'll pay you a salary. Elrose looked at the densely packed, one-sided terms and conditions and fainted on the spot from sheer anger. I stood up, walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, and looked down at the industrial town, where construction on Phase 2 was in full swing. Roxy obediently brought me a glass of whiskey on the rocks and snuggled up at my feet. Overnight, I went from being a turkey about to end up on the grill to a god among this band of savages. And now, I'm about to become the sole financial tycoon in this fantastical, strange world. What a great start, I said, raising my glass and smiling faintly at the black industrial smoke outside the window. Friends from another world, are you ready to face capitalism's ultimate beating? And that's a wrap, folks. If this story gave you that sweet dopamine hit and was more satisfying than peeling the plastic off a brand new TV, do me a massive favor. Obliterate that like button and hit subscribe. I'm locked in the content mine, serving up fresh, ridiculously satisfying stories every single day. See you tomorrow for your next fix.